Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Milsom. This is a slightly more detailed video with more generalised tips in it. The PowerPoint I actually made for use right before the real exam in February, but still I thought it would be useful, especially since I'm not there this week. So these are some general tips to help you feel more confident for next Wednesday. Don't forget we've also got Tuesday's lesson before then. Okay, excuse my voice. I'm hoping it'll be better next week. Okay, so the planning time. Remember, watch the other video first because that takes you through the general structure. So you get 15 minutes to prepare. And there's some more about that on the other video, but some tips, more tips for that 15 minutes. Use the dictionaries, look up keywords, make notes on your sources, highlight things, leave time to plan for the discussion, and make yourself an organised plan. If you have the idea of a structure, particularly for the monologue, the discussion, you're more looking at ideas of things you can talk about, aren't you? Because you're reliant on the other person as well. But for the monologue, maybe use numbers you can follow to create a structure. That seems to work really well for many people. All right. In the preparation time, and in the general, when you come into the exam room, do not panic, particularly this time. This is just an informal run through so we can show you what it feels like, the sort of, the scenario and how it all works. Then we'll have a mock exam next year when we get back to school in September or probably in, I don't know when, but after in the new school year. And this is an exam about communication and language skills, and many of you have got, even some of you that find writing really difficult. When you talk, it's really good the way you talk, so you can feel confident about that. All right, when we get into the actual exam and in the planning time, I suppose, make sure instead of just chatting randomly, make sure you pay close attention to the instructions you've been given. Stay focused on the theme you're being asked about. All right, here's some examples. You can pause this and look at these if you want. I'm not going to read them out. This shows you, look, I know some of these topics you haven't covered yet. As I said, this PowerPoint was written for the end, just before the real thing. So focus on, so look at the first one. We have done this. I'm going to talk about the American dream today with a focus on African Americans and their experience of opportunity in the United States. I'd like to start with a very brief definition of what the American dream is. Yeah, so you give in a really clear response to the instruction. That helps start you off. I said that in the last video as well. The next topic we haven't covered yet, but that's okay, we will cover it soon. All right, when you come to speaking in this exam, it's so much better if you could use subject-specific vocabulary. Instead of a sort of very general, informal style, you've got the words, you know the vocabulary. Just elevate it a little bit. So instead of saying the roads are busy with cars, you would say congestion, traffic jams. Again, that's a topic we've not done really yet. We've done this one though. People use cannabis in their free time. Instead, say cannabis is a recreational drug. Farmers get money from the government. You could talk about farming subsidies. Fossil fuels will run out. Fossil fuels are a finite resource. Do you see? Just try to be conscious of elevating it a little bit. This is in general in the monologue and the discussion. All right, another one that's really general is if you forget a word. Gosh, that happens to all of us, even in our own language it happens. You will get a paper handout about this, more of that later. But if you forget a word, these are my main tips. Use a more general word. If you can't remember office block, use the word building. Give some examples and explain it. So you can't think of the word inequalities, you've forgotten it. But instead you can say when people are treated differently and unfairly. Now I know that seems to contradict the last slide, but I'm talking now about times when you forget a word that you feel you need. There are other ways of saying it. Describe something. People make money instead of needing the word profits. Do you see? I'm just saying when you forget a word, don't panic. Or you can backtrack a little bit. You could say something like, let me say that again in a slightly different way. In a conversation or even a presentation, it's fine to say those phrases. it guides the listener through what you're saying, doesn't it? So if you get to a point and you've forgotten the word you wanted and you need to rephrase, just say, no, I'm going to rephrase that a little bit, but say it with confidence. Okay, next one. Never, ever, ever slip into German. Do not use any German words. As soon as you do that, we have to make a note of it, and it reflects badly. Now, you could have an otherwise brilliant monologue with one German word in it, and of course you'd still get a high mark. However, I don't think you can put any German in there and access the 14s, the 15s. Leave the German out. Remember that sometimes, if in doubt, just make sure you pronounce it in an English sounding way. Okay, so no German, no German. Can't say that enough. It sounds awful if you slip into German. Okay, then pause this and look at this. These are things you already know. I'm just reminding you. When you come to talk about photographs and cartoons, you need the continuous, the present progressive. There is a man standing in front of a pile of electronic waste. Yeah, you say what's there, that you say what's happening in the photo or in the cartoon, and you use the present continuous, the ing, there is a man standing, to do that. All right, the simple present for things which are facts. Fast fashion, I've not covered this yet, don't worry about that. These are just examples. Fast fashion is a huge environmental problem because it creates large amounts of waste. Yeah, so that's the simple present. Fast fashion is because it creates, that's facts. And then the present perfect for things which have happened recently or things which are relevant today. So look, we have done this topic. Protest groups in the USA have been trying to change gun control laws for many years. Have been trying. Actually, that's the present perfect continuous, but you know what I mean. You use the forms of the present perfect for talking about the recent past. All right. Those three tenses are really useful for this exam. All right, some tips for the monologue. If you get a quotation, don't read it out, select the words. Stick to the instructions. Start by explaining the theme of your monologue, and if there's any definition to be given, you can do that. And then talk about each of your sources, the text in turn. Make sure that you label the source explicitly with your words. All right, so you'd say, moving on to source B. Starting with source C. Yeah, here you can see underneath in green. I'll leave you to read those. Then move on. When you've dealt with the three sources, you can move on to make some more general or in-depth comments of your own. What do you know about the topic you've been asked? What do you want to tell us about your knowledge of this topic? All right. Then what I've done next is just taken you through some of the different graphics you might get, just to remind you of the type of things we've looked at before and things that might crop up in this exam. So this one would be called a bar chart. You can see why it's got bars here. All right. Don't forget to look at the title of what your bar chart is. What is it showing? That's how you would start, isn't it? We haven't done autonomous vehicles yet. That comes later. But you get the idea. You don't go through and read 45%, 16%, 15%, 8%, 7%. No, don't do that. Pick out what's interesting. But this is a bar chart. Don't forget to look at the topic. And if you get the next one, a graph, then remember you want to describe what the X and Y axes show. This is time in years. Look, you can see the different dates along the bottom. Tell us this. And it's temperature along the y-axis, and then say it's a graph about global temperatures showing the annual average and the 5-year average. Yes, explain what it is you're looking at, and then pick out something. But this you would call a graph, wouldn't you? This one, yummy, we would call a pie chart. Okay, so again, this is all to do with farming. Look here, this one. You would tell us, what is the pie chart showing? Where is this nitrogen pollution coming from? And then you would pick out some various interesting things. Yes, okay, so some of them have got nothing to do with farming, but for almost 40% of nitrogen pollution comes from... You get the idea. You've got to describe what's there, including explaining what it's about, the title, and then pick out interesting things. Okay, and this one's a pie chart. So you've got 3 different types of data there, haven't you? Or ways of presenting data. Bar chart, graph, pie chart. All right. Then some tips for the dialogue, some of which I said in the other video. All right, always starts with student A, randomly assigned. Start with a sort of introduction to what you're going to talk about and then make a comment, student A. Don't hand over immediately because that makes it look as if you've got nothing useful to say. So student A leads the way. That's not a disadvantage to student B in any way at all whatsoever. So then work as a team. This is a great practice. This is why we want to do this practice, so you can try out your teams and get a feel for the exam. Listen to your partner and respond. I said this in the other video as well. Respond to what they've got to say. Stick closely to the instructions unless you feel you've finished them and you move it on. And then give yourself some bullet points when you're planning in that 15 minutes to use as a guide. You could talk about them to manage the discussion. So look, I think we've covered sometimes the questions also include bullet points. So sometimes those bullets are given to you. And sometimes you might have to come up with your own ideas of what you might talk about. So look, say you're given bullet points, 3 bullet points. You can actually say, manage the discussion in a clear way. Student B can say, I think we've covered why Americans value firearms so much. So let's move on now and talk about strategies which might help reduce gun crime. Don't stutter like that. That wouldn't be a good thing to do. But do you see what I mean? And then, or you can make a suggestion. Shall we talk about why child migrants cross the US border without their parents? Yeah, so it's perfectly acceptable. In fact, it's a bonus if you clearly manage this conversation, this dialogue. Both of you can do that. And when we practice more nearer the time, you can work out ways of doing that together. So you work almost like dance partners in it. You really get good at working together. But for this run through, just be aware that this is a conversation. When you have a conversation, unless it's your very, very best friend, you don't suddenly switch topic without warning, because everybody would think that was really odd and everybody would get lost. When we're in a conversation, we signal what we're going to do, and that's what you must do in this part of the exam. Again, as with the other one, I'm sorry about my slightly strange voice. 2, please send me a quick email if there's anything you would like to ask as a result of watching this video. Remember that you can slow these videos down, you can speed them up, you can pause them, you can watch them again. Okay, hope that's useful. See you next week.